When you're also looking at the things that people build from space, there's also some fun things. That thing right there is the spiral jetty. It's actually a work of art in Great Salt Lake. And what's neat about it is that it's usually, well, it's often submerged anyway, but the Great Salt Lake, the level of that lake actually fluctuates. So when this image was taken by one of these high-resolution satellites, it was actually visible. This is just a couple hundred feet long, just to give you an idea of the size. Here's another artwork. This was probably the first work of art that was made intentionally to be visible from space. I'm not sure about that, but it probably is. The title is called Peace, and it's 100 meters on a side. And this was in Australia. And what they did is they got a few people together and they laid colored stones and colored pieces of plastic and so forth. And they made a deal with the satellite image company that, okay, we'll take a picture at this time. And there it is. And it's supposed to represent an Australian Aboriginal meeting place near a river. Oh, here's actually an image. Let's see if I can. That's not any better. Oh well. This is actually a very different image. Again, almost all the images I've been showing you are sunlight, reflected sunlight. I also mentioned radar. Here's another image that isn't reflected sunlight. Okay, anybody know what this is? Night lights, yeah. These, and again, people are getting used to seeing this too. Almost all the lights that we're seeing are street lights. So in the case we got this is Europe over here. This is Russia. There's the Trans-Siberian Railroad. There's the Nile River. Actually, here, let me get up. See that? The Nile itself doesn't glow, all right? But in Egypt, almost everybody in Egypt lives right close to the Nile, so that's where all the streetlights are. And you can just see the upper left. You can just barely see North America. You can use maps like these to show where things are bright, but also population densities. Now, this satellite wasn't launched to give us pretty pictures of streetlights. It was actually launched by the Air Force to do weather forecasting at night to detect reflected moonlight from clouds. After it was up there, they realized there was another application. Also, I should mention, this is not a snapshot, okay, because you'll notice there's no clouds. All right, this is a combination of images recorded, data recorded over many months into the picture that you see here. And the blue area would not be there either. That blue area was added for aesthetic purposes. Okay, so one of the things that we look at when we try to see human-built things is you notice the history of trading, where urban areas exist, where people have always gotten together to make things or trade things. That's downtown San Francisco right there from one of those high-resolution satellites. Here's another one, Sydney, Australia, the famous Opera House down here. Largest city in Australia. This is Hamburg, Germany. This is actually the port there of, and all of these little rectangles are containers, container shipping. It's the largest container shipping facility in Europe. Here's a good, this is actually Havana. One of the best harbors in the New World, and it was the headquarters of Spanish fleets that would come and go. The old national capital of Cuba is right there. Again, these images show the extent of the urban area and then changes through time. This is O'Hare Airport in Chicago. So, yes, that's somebody that's maybe flown through O'Hare. Yeah, there's the United Gates are here, the American Gates are here. They're actually building another runway that I believe is going right here. And again, these kinds of images are now are potentially useful for doing that planning. Okay, what buildings need to be removed? Well, whose houses do we need to buy? For better or worse, for where to put those runways. Another thing you notice when looking at these images, every city has an airport, and every city has a few golf courses. And then finally, I'm going to finish up by talking about a few changes that we see. One of the main applications for this kind of remote sensing is to see changes, because we can take an image once, then take an image of the same area a couple years later, and see what's changed or what hasn't changed. In this case, this image here is from a part of Bolivia that was, until 100 years ago, almost entirely forested. The dark colors are areas that are covered by forest. The light areas are areas that have been cleared for agriculture. And you can see all these rectangles show agricultural plots. There's a few funnier shapes here where they've got small villages where the plots are actually shaped like pieces of a pie. What's driving changes there now is mostly soybean cultivation. Here's an example, 25 years apart, the same exact area. Okay, now this is in Rondônia, Brazil now. So on the left is an image taken by the Landsat 1 satellite. On the right, exactly 25 years later from the Landsat 7 satellite. Now it's a little bit hard to see, but the way we used to call this the fishbone pattern on the left, for obvious reasons. You start with a road. See this? Here's the main road. Okay, that road is follow the shadow of my hand, goes sort of here. Okay, and again, people move out, and then you clear the land for agriculture. That's what's going on here. The rates of change, what the people that work at the Space Agency in Brazil, for instance, they use these kinds of images to track rates of change, where things are changing and where they're not. There are rules about how much forest you're allowed to remove and where you're allowed to remove it and where you're not. And so you can make maps like this showing who's following the rules and who's not. You can also do things like, with other sensors, detect forest fires, because one of the common ways of clearing the forest, instead of doing all that work to cut the trees down, is to burn them. Because the fires release that heat that you can actually directly detect. Here's a really interesting picture from, remember it was 2 Christmases ago, the Indian Ocean tsunami. Of course, it started off the coast of Indonesia, but then that tsunami made it all the way across the Indian Ocean. And one of these high-resolution satellites happened to be overhead in Sri Lanka at the instant when the wave struck. Just a random coincidence. But in this image here, here's the ocean, obviously. The wave had already come in, and now it's sort of sloshing back out. So you can see this area here is actually a slightly muddy color. It's because it's actually submerged a little bit, and then it's sloshing out. The next image actually shows closer to where the tsunami happened. The city of Banda Aceh is right up here. That's the largest town in that area that was really devastated by this tsunami. Before the tsunami on the left, and on the right just after the tsunami. Now you can see these areas here are actually pretty low, so they're pretty close to sea level as it is. So it didn't take a whole lot, and they're still completely submerged, because just a little bit of material was eroded away, so those agricultural fields are underwater. Again, another prime way of showing how we can actually map where things have changed pretty rapidly. And then talking about things changing, I mentioned fires. All right, here's fires in Southern California, some of the worst fires that they've ever had. This is Baja California in Mexico. San Diego is right there. This is not a good day in San Diego. And Los Angeles is right here. And here are all the forest fires. And there's a northerly wind. It's a nice, warm, dry wind fanning those fires. And we just have huge amounts of smoke going hundreds of miles offshore, then eventually settling onto the surface of the water. Here's another example of, this is a weather front moving towards the west. This is Africa right here. Morocco is right here, Straits of Gibraltar there. Okay, this is a weather front, but you see that halo around it? That's a halo of dust. What it did is it picked up all this dust from the desert and carried it in the atmosphere. In fact, we now know that this dust easily makes it all the way across the Atlantic. And it can actually be, you can see the effect in things like coral reefs in the Caribbean. And we have these global sensors that can now track where dust is on the planet. We can see it moving all over the Earth. All right, here's your last quiz question. Here's a picture from a European weather satellite. The borders have been added. And you see where my hand is? See how the image is kind of darker? Why? What's going on there? Any ideas? What do you think? Water temperature. That's an interesting guess, but actually it's actually a difference in the light. Yeah. There's actually less light here for some reason. What would cause that to happen? Well, actually, just one final clue. But we see the difference on the land surface and in the ocean. What you're looking at is a solar eclipse. That dark area is the shadow of the moon. So this weather satellite was in orbit, and when you have a solar eclipse, the shadow of the moon is on the surface of the Earth, so that shadow was moving this way. This was in 2001.